in terms of women's football, growth for us would be visibility. Visibility in terms of media, visibility in terms of how many girls are playing. So when we look at those two factors, from the time I started playing and getting involved into the national team, so a lot has changed and the sport has grown.
Welcome to another episode of the Sports Season Podcast, where we get to know the sports that you know about and those that you should know about. Once again, my name is Javi Sison, and our guest for today is a former RIFA MVP, WNCAA Mythical Selection member, Palarong Pambansa MVP, the former captain of the Ateneo women's football team, a former UAAP best striker, and member of the Philippine women's national football team. I can keep going, CamRod. And of course, the uh, project management vice president of the Ateneo Environmental Science Society, the CR7 of the Philippines, CamRod. CamRod, thank you so much for being here and for guesting.
Hi, Jigo. Thank you. Grabe naman yung intro mo. And it's been long. For those who don't know, Jigo and I met through college. We were in the same org. And when I graduated, he went on to be one of the leaders of the org. Diba? So, onting hype naman for you. Good job.
Actually, yun nga, when we first met, like obviously I knew that you're captain ng football team, but when now that I invited you here, it's the only time I got to do some research, and wow, ang haba ng resume ng awards. Okay, so first of all, I just want to start off by asking how you've been, what have you been up to in quarantine, personally, and of course with the national team.
Yeah, fortunately, I've been surviving. Like many of us, diba? Survive pa naman. And then I've been working throughout, so it's very fortunate that our family business is part of like the essentials, you'd say, because we're in the supply chain. So throughout the many versions of CQ or community quarantines in the Philippines, we've been able to operate. So my dad is my boss, so that's an interesting dynamic inside the house. Pero naman, we bond over football. So throughout my career as a football player, siya talaga. So um, I've been happy now recently because we've started training for the national team. I've sort of pushed our relationship back to the to the coach player type instead of the boss and daughter type. Ayan. Interesting, yeah. How about you, Jigo? Kamusta? Kamusta law school?
I'm good. I'm good. It's law school is not that good, but we are where we are. Okay.
Survive.
I invited you here because of course, I want to talk about you and your whole career, but also I found it interesting. Then, I'm trying to highlight not just underrated sports here, but also underrated aspects of sports in general. And I wanted to talk about, aside from your career, also your um, advocacy, or how you're very vocal about women's sports, and of course, your experience not just as a student leader, not just as a student athlete, but like all three, like a student athlete leader or student leader
Yeah.
athlete. Okay, but of course,
Many lives.
but of course, we're gonna start off with you and your career. So I always ask my guests, or start off by asking, what made you start playing football, or like when did it all start?
I started when I was 10, and I started with the main intention of wanting a medal, like literally, because my brother, my baby brother, 5 years younger than me, he came home with like a gold medal from football. I was like, where did you get that? Gusto ko din ng ganyan. So even if I think, getting medals din naman with like taekwondo or swimming, which are my previous sports before football, and there's something different with like the fact that my brother came home with a medal, and I told my dad, and to his joy, diba, I said I wanted to start playing football. So, like I mentioned kanina, diba, my dad's he also used to be a football player. So, to have his firstborn child to play his sport, parang yun talaga gusto niya. But, I went sports, gymnastics, ballet, taekwondo, swimming. And then, at 10, football na. I laced up my boots when I was in for the Ateneo summer clinic, AFC,
Yes.
Ateneo Football Center, in summer, and then rest was history.
So okay, I've asked this. I've had someone else from MC as a guest, so I asked them the same question. Na, when here in Ateneo, for us, it's always parang everyone knows na everyone wants to play basketball at some point. You know what I mean? So I wanted to know, parang in MC, across the bridge, like what was that go-to sport? Was it football or like did everyone, parang what was something that everyone had to try or at least tried once?
Personally, for me, football talaga ako, Gigas, and bias from the start. But I think interesting because how our system or how our sports system is set up is that in grade school, all students go through like numerous sports, either kickball. There's kickball in grade 4, or grade 5, grade 6 is volleyball, and then basketball. So I think in that process, it allows like the students to understand and
Yeah.
sort of get to know the sport kung para sa kanila ba or hindi. But yeah, I entered. So from AFC, actually, I transitioned into at grade 5 into the football varsity. So I was actually part of the very first Miriam football varsity at that time. So that was around 2007. Yun. Tapos, wala, tuloy-tuloy na with my teammates.
Okay, so you did mention though that you tried a lot of different sports and activities. What was it about football that kind of made it stick all these years?
It's a team sport. Like, yun talaga. To have people dying with you on, no, fighting with you on the pitch. I think that's what made me enjoy it all the more. One is, of course, it's fun because at that age, I was pretty good at it. But at the same time, parang I got to travel with a team, like with a group of girls. Siguro 10 to 15 girls, no? We would travel to, let's say, Alabang. Di ba for a North person, malayo na yung Alabang. To Alabang or to, ano ba, sa Laguna, sa Brent.
Yeah.
For you to travel with a group of girls. So it was fun. And eventually, the traveling became farther, di ba, to another continent, to with different sets, but the fact na it's with the team, yun yung talagang win sa akin.
Okay. Okay, so can you take us, I guess, to what your experience was like, grade school, high school? Because parang for us guys in Ateneo, it's always like yung rivalry you're always looking for is like Ateneo Lasal. What was that equivalent, I guess, for you in MC?
Poveda. Sila talaga.
Really?
MC Poveda, when we talk about high school, grade school, high school, either MC Poveda or MC CSA. So you talk about
CS, sorry,
Rifa,
what?
Rifa Sikat Tournament, CSA, Colegio de San
CSA,
Agustin.
CSA, okay.
So sa Makati sila. Yep. So when you talk about prominent sports programs in Metro Manila, siling standout. So kasama na yung MC doon. So laging pag finals, yun yung mga magkakatapat.
Okay, okay. So tell us about what was the competition like? Grade school, high school. Was it parang were you guys always winning? Like was it easy or what was that whole dynamic like?
Okay. With all humility, I would say that MC was really one of the standouts, no, in football. So whether it was 7-a-side, 9-a-side, all the way to 11-a-side football. So that just pertains to, so for those who aren't familiar with football, 7, 9, and 11 is basically how many players plays at a given point in time. So in those age brackets, MC was sort of the ones that are dominant. And then a typical weekend for us as a grade school, high school student would be we'd have a 11-a-side game or a 9-a-side game per weekend. Per weekend, and then sasabayan mo pa siya ng parang those Sunday one day football leagues.
Yeah,
Na parang may ganon. So looking back, I'd think na parang wow, I was playing at least one full day, diba? Just running and football. So I was like, wow, ang galing ko pala. The power of the youth. Yun talaga yung tumatak sa. So it was busy, really. If we weren't playing parang a full day tournament like Alaska Cup, we would have siguro back-to-back 11-a-side games. So, sige thinking about that now, parang na ano lang ako, parang na war flashbacks.
Okay. So
Yep.
like I mentioned earlier how you were part of the mythical selection in WNCAA back in high school. So I want to know now, like, is the recruitment of football players similar or close to how intense they report about, like basketball, for example? Na talagang like siguro when I'm not 100% sure of what year that was, but when were you being recruited by a lot of schools coming out of high school?
I think how the recruitment process is set up for football players is that the more visible you are to coaches, whether it be high school coaches or more especially collegiate coaches now, the more chances you are to be recruited. So fortunately, I was in a school which played a lot of games. And as a football player, that's so important, no? Because the more games you play, the better you become. But at the same time, the more chances for you to be recruited and seen, diba? So at that time, I was in the REFA tournament. So that's an inter-school varsity tournament that happens, I think, at least twice a school year. And then we were in futsal pa. So futsal is the main tournament for futsal is WNCAA. And what also helps was that I was also part of the youth national team back then. So I'd be playing with our youth and eventually the senior team. So I was playing with college students, college athletes na rin. So may parang dynamic na, oy, punta ka dito. Oy, nakausap ka na ba ni ganito, ganyan. So, ayun, fortunate enough, I had my options and eventually I chose Ateneo.
Okay,
OPM.
so of course I have to ask, why Ateneo? Because okay, batch ko sila ano eh, Marty, Mika Core, and parang
Mm,
it's not a secret, or it's very obvious na there's a lot of MC players in the Ateneo team. So
tama.
what's up with that? Like, is it just kasi parang, I mean, katabi nga naman, or like what's the factors? I think, if I'm not mistaken, your coaches also are from Ateneo, but I guess first of all, what's the factors that come into that, and personally for you, what how did you come to that decision?
Okay. Um, when you talk about the team back then, no, it was eventually led by or coached by our head coach back then in MC. So, yung main factor of, oy, laro ka dito, bubuo ko yung parang MC team, di ba? Parang ganun yung at the start. So, it was attractive to me in that sense na, hey, I'm going to be playing with my teammates who are, di ba, who I started playing with in grade school and high school. So in that in terms of like comfort and fun, it was there. But of course, when you're on that cross or that cross point, that cross point when you choose schools now, you also think of other factors rather than if you want to just go there because of your friends. So my main reason would be, of course, my course. So psych, I'm a psych major, and among the universities in the Philippines, no, Ateneo is one of the top psych schools. So alongside UP, I think. So that's really where I based my decision from. But even if I say this, a lot of like the people I know would be like, "Weka, from the start Ateneo eh." Yeah, I don't know. Ateneo was siguro I was the defining factor for me was the defining factors for me were of course the football program, the scholarship that was offered, the package, but at the same time the course and the environment. Diba, you know how open and green and the culture within Ateneo is actually very ano ba, promotes growth and just playing something bigger than yourself, diba? Add AMDT. So, yung ganong, all of that together equals Cam and Ateneo. Yeah.
Okay. So I know, if I'm not mistaken, before you started playing for Ateneo, you were already playing for the senior national team, right? Now I'll get into that later, because it's something I do want to discuss. So we'll come back to that. Before we get into your college career, there's something, what I want to ask first is, um, in team sports, almost all the time, athletes don't pick their number randomly. So I
Mhm.
want to know what's the story behind you picking number seven, because I don't know if Cristiano Ronaldo was already CR7 when back then. But yeah, what's the story behind you and your number?
Yeah, so it's our family number, plain and simple, and that's my dad's number. So my dad was a big influence in me, so I saw him. Even if I wasn't playing football when I was a kid, I'd always be exposed to his games, and he'd be repping number seven. So I was like, why not I do too? So that was my first jersey number in grade school. Throughout high school halls, also I was number seven. It was only in, I think, first year college that I did not wear it because of seniority, diba? So my
Seniority.
senior was wearing seven. And then I was number three, which is another family number. So that's my mom's number naman. And then I guess it just so happened na my initials are also CR, tapos seven pa. So yeah, people call me CR7, but like, I'm shy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going into college, what was the adjustment like? Like, okay, I want to ask, parang from grade school to high school, like how big of an adjustment, and now from high school to college, like how big of a jump it was there, or was it seamless? I guess.
Definitely it was a big jump for me, and my first season would attest to that, no? Because I did not score any goals. So it was my worst performing season ever in my career. And looking back, I think it was because of really just adjustment to pressure, to the different kinds of pressure, but also to the style of game. Because uh, you're now playing with teams who are, as a team, more advanced in terms of the tactics, their technical skills are more locked in, and their understanding of that game. When you So the challenge for you as a player going into a college team would be to sort of keep up to that. Either you keep up to it or you give value to your team and contribute in that sense. So yun yung naging adjustment ko then. I think it was more on the pressures that I had to adjust to. Hence, my very big, my very defining freshman career in college. So I was able to adjust to it eventually after working on skills, mainly the shooting skills. And then thankfully naman, come second year, third year, started scoring more goals. And I ended up I ended my career with like an all-time high. So from zero in freshman year, I ended with, I think, 13. That was my personal best in goals. So yeah, it's all about growth.
Okay. So going back a little, was it yeah, so aside from just skills, or scoring goals, what was the adjustment like going into the team? Because I mean, I would think it's a little easier than most have to go through, because a lot of you are from MC nga. So I'm sure a lot of the older players, you kind of knew already, but it's still a whole nother team. You're still met with not with players that came from from a lot of different schools. So how was that adjustment like? And like, who was there any specific player that really helped you integrate into the team?
Mm-hmm. I think aside from the normal pressures of adjusting to the game, it's more of adjusting to the culture of the team. So again, you're playing with players who are older, but at the same time, parang part of being in the team is knowing also how to respect the culture and the sort of demands that they ask of you when you enter. Lalo na, di ba, pag freshman ka, may mga rookie duties na kailangan kang gawin, di ba? And when you think of it, face value, it's really just added work. But really, it's more of like they are physically and of course, in terms of mindset, adjusting you into how it's supposed to be like in a college team, college culture. Ayun. In terms of ano naman, players who helped me, I think really your batchmates help you. So shout out Aina Martin. She's my batchmate in football. Eventually we became the two captains in our senior year. So yun, in our fourth year, I was team captain with her. So yeah.
There was one year, I forgot which year it was, but you suffered an injury, right? ACL.
Mhm.
Tama ba?
MCL.
MCL.
MCL
Okay.
naman.
Is there
Whew.
okay?
Thank
Whoops.
you, Lord.
Sorry. Sorry. Kakatos. No, so
Uh,
because
I'm a knock. I'm a knock.
that's not as bad because I've torn my ACL, so it's
Oh,
not
God
as
bless
bad.
you. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, so but I'm sure, like, how many months were you out, and how was, what was that experience like?
So I actually, when you compare about all the lesser evils, my injury was like an MCL grade level sprain, which is a partial tear, right? So I was out for I think 3 months. The worst part about that was really getting injured towards the tail end of the season. So I think we were in our last 3 games of the season, and that was my senior year of playing. So I think the most heartbreaking part about suffering that injury was I wasn't able to play my last game with like Aina and with my batchmates who were graduating then. So it's more of an emotional aspect naman for me. But thankfully, with the help of our physiotherapist, I was able to endure it, and thankfully, it's just to that extent. Yeah.
But okay, so but coming back, was it like, was it normal? I mean, with your position pa as a forward, it's very demanding on, speed
Mhm.
and your legs in general. So what was that like? Because a lot of people have trouble getting back to the same level that they were.
Definitely. Um, I think I was fortunate enough to be a psych major in terms of the mindset. No, so once I got injured, of course, the typical emotions or experience you would have would be more on the mental side. The physical side you could repair, diba? But it's more of the mental aspect of it that you have to actively work on as an athlete going back into competitive level. So knowing that, I had to sort of keep my mind fresh. So I'd always be watching games, football games back then, and I would do a lot of visualization about like what or how I would be once I step into the field again. So by managing that kind of like by managing my mindset and my emotions, the transition was a bit easier. Of course, I was frustrated because like on the first time I stepped on the pitch, parang ba't di gumagana yung legs ko ng, ng alam ko, di ba? Like how it would. But yeah, fortunate na enough naman na-apply ko yung pagka-psych ko doon. So yeah, fortunate about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because same din naman, like, well, ACL nga naman sa akin. So it was a lot, I think a lot longer. But I guess, at
For
least,
sure. Times 4.
yeah.
Times 3, times 4.
Okay. So now I saw a post. I forgot which site or which page it was from, but you had, or I think it might have been your post. Parang medyo na ano. But you had a story about
Hello.
you pointing upwards after every goal,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
So is it okay if I ask you, to share
Of
what
course.
the behind, what's the story behind that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Basically, I point up to the sky because I'm dedicating my game for my mom. So my mom passed away when I was 12, turning 13. So I was grade 7 then, and throughout the start of my many games as either taekwondo, swimming, football, she was always there, like typical soccer mom. So I knew na even if she was physically gone, like she'd always be watching me specifically. And how I view it, that's why I make sure na I point up to the sky is that, diba, she now has VIP access to all my games and trainings. Like, diba? So for me it's really just acknowledging that everything I do and the success that I have, it's really because of her guidance. Diba? Yun.
Okay. All right. Then chills. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
VIP access. So that's share ko lang, share ko lang. So whenever I empathize with friends and family who have lost their loved ones, especially those in the football community. One of the messages I share with them is, and the prayers that I send to my mom is really to just like, hey, can you prepare their seat already and in your section, your VIP section? They're gonna be there soon kasi, so can you help them at least ease them in? So yun yung mindset ko lang, and feel ko more of the spiritual side of me as a player, diba? So I know that I'd always have like someone who would cushion my fall a little bit more, or like push me a little bit farther with every sprint pagod na. So yeah,
Oh yeah, and
diba?
that's a really for me it's a really nice way to look at it. Parang everyone says that they're watching over them. Talagang this one they're watching over my games, ganun.
Yeah. Kaya pag may mali akong mistake, alam kong sorry isa pa. Pa-help, isa pang isa pang game, isa pang play, sa score ko na to, parang ganon.
Okay. So now we'll go a little bit more on the non-football side of your college experience, and this is where we met in ASS, or basically in org life.
Yeah.
And so because I wanted to talk to you about it. Na parang we always talk about student leaders. Obviously in Ateneo there's a lot. We talk about student athletes, and you can see that all in any school. Um, but we don't really talk about I guess yung parang leader athlete, or like yung org active athlete na basically student din, so all three. So parang start off by asking, what was that dynamic like, or like how were you able to manage the time? I think that's the basic question that most people want to know about people who do all of these different things.
Mm-hmm. Wow, joke lang. It's more of again prioritization. So there's always a saying amongst the team or maybe student athletes that the reason why it's called student athlete, it's because you're a student first before you're an athlete. So even with the student leaders, it's student first and then leaders. So um, I guess that was how I approached my college life, being like having three different worlds. I'd say that with um sometimes crisscross, and yeah, I went you in that side of the world, diba? Na we would really try to push our advocacy and really grow the community, right? Um, so looking back, or for anyone who would want to explore or push or stretch themselves a little bit more, for example, if they want to, they're a student right now and they're looking to go into sports or to go into orgs or to go into all three, no, just it has to be clear with you that you are a student first, and then you have to manage your time. Which hours of the day do you transition into an athlete? Which hours of the day do you transition into an org leader or an org member? So I like to believe that I have many lives. I think that's one of my philosophies. No, I really do believe in the power of and. Like I can be a student and an athlete. I could be a student and an athlete and a leader and a daughter. And a lot of us are like that. So um seeing yourself as being more than just one person, one life, it should sort of empower you in that sense that you could be more than just, for example, you can be more than just a law student. You're also a podcast, diba, pioneer for yourself. You're also a leader for your org. So, diba, isn't that so encouraging to know na, hey, I could be more than who I am. Parang sobrang, wait lang, parang sobrang atenista no na, parang be more, do more. Magis. Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about student athletes, they always say na parang the discipline in their sports, or the discipline that they learn from their sport helps them in their studies, ganun, di ba? Now I want to ask on the part of being an um, active person or org leader, like what helped you from being that org leader in your sport and vice versa?
It's you guys. Like, it's really the energy you bring and the type of perspectives you bring. Because I think that's one of the advantages of knowing that you can be more than just one identity, one person. It's by being these many different individuals in one, you get to also meet many different individuals. And from there, you form parang your understanding siguro of the game. It becomes deeper, diba? And vice versa. Diba? So in terms of sa org naman, it was more of how we, what I learned from the org was more of how parang we saw our team. Like, it was small, di ba? Or the community we had, it was small, but we knew na we're able to, even if we're few, we could bring that sort of change. So it was, I was able to carry that over to my sport na, um, hey, we are at this levels, right? So at that time, we were trying, third place, trying to push for finals for the gold. Hey, we are here, and if we do believe, diba, if our values or if we're firm with our values, we could push further, diba? It was really more of that. So doing more, being more, and grabe ko ulit yung kaya parang mas mapapa-enjoy ka. So yeah, it was fun for me seeing like having like after class I'd go to the org tapos sa org room tapos makulit kayo tapos after that pa I'd go to the gym and is iba pang klaseng kulit. So yeah, it's knowing that you're not alone as well. Diba? Ang daming tao like you who are supportive of what you do, and despite it all, you're pushing for like one thing, one advocacy, one goal.
Okay, so
Diba? I'm
now
sure you'd agree there, Mr.
for sure. I mean, iba naman yung energy ng MVP 307.
Oo. Shout out sa lahat doon.
Okay, so now kind of going back to football. So I'm gonna go in the middle of advocacy and sports. So basically yung sports advocacy. Kasi you were very vocal about women's sports, about how women's sports needs more support. I remember you're posting or you're part of yung Girls Got Game, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So um, with that, I kind of want to ask you about the current state of women's sports from your experience. You know, ever since you were a kid to now, like how far has the support for women's sports gone since you can remember? That I will start off with that.
Sige. Siguro, I'd like to define how I could view growth. No? So in terms of women's football, growth for us would be visibility. Visibility in terms of media, visibility in terms of how many girls are playing. So when we look at those two factors, from the time I started playing and getting involved into the national team, so around 2007 to 2012, a lot has changed and the sport has grown in that sense. Diba? And it was very much evident in the Southeast Asian Games last December 2019. It was for the first time ever held here in the Philippines, in Laguna. And siguro, that first game of walking out into the pitch and singing the national athlete, because how games are positioned is, you walk out to the field, you're alongside your opponent, and you face the stadium. And then of course the flag is there, diba? But beyond that is the crowd. And it was that moment that I knew, like, wow, women's football has really grown because the stadium had people in it. And it wasn't just 5 or 10 people or OFWs. Because when we'd go out to out of the country, it would always be like the OFWs or the families that's there. So 10 to 15. Siguro madami na yung 15. Or like the other team watching the game. But when I walked out there, I was singing the national anthem. I saw my flag there, my teammates behind the flag, and like at least 500 people on the stadium. That's when I knew, wow, we have really gone so far as a sport, right? So I cried, obviously. There are clips showing that I cried. Well, I'm really the crybaby. So while singing the national athlete, it all just set in or sunk in sa akin na eto na yun, naglalaro ako para sa para sa bayan ko, para sa mga kababayan ko. So, siguro yun yung first to mind ko when you asked me that question. In terms of visibility, in terms of girls playing naman, one of the indicators there that I was able to sort of, which is testament to the growth of the sport, is that there are more women's teams.
Yeah.
Right? When we look at so aside from women's teams, there's also more tournaments that encourages women's teams to play. So back then, when I was playing in high school, the only competitions I'd know would be the official ones, diba? So WNCAA, RIFA, then UAAP. Pero ngayon, parang may corporate league cups na, di ba? May weekend club teams cup na. So the sevens, meron na rin ganun. So it, I think, boils down to that in terms of visibility of the sports, number of girls playing, the opportunities for those girls to play, and how the media is giving attention to all the girls playing and the tournaments they play. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like you were saying, there's a lot of examples that we can cite of how women's sports has grown. Like I like recently yung WNBL, the women's basketball league, first one here, and we have a lot of women in different sports succeeding abroad. And but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of examples on how far it still has to go. I know I'm not sure if you were still. I think you were not playing at this point, but I remember someone tweeting or posting about yung UAP at anong women's football had a smaller field for some weird reason. That one year, I'm not sure, but.
Yeah.
So for now that you've talked about how far it's gone, you know, how far do you think it still has to go, and like what can or maybe should be done to maybe reach that goal?
Right. So when we go back to growth in terms of visibility of in media, right? Thank you for citing the example in terms of the UAAP, because currently, still, diba, when we talk about media coverage for women's games, for women's sports, the only games covered by the media is the final games, diba? Ba't ganon? Pag sa men's team, pag titignan natin naman yung men's team, all their games are shown. Like if not all, I don't know, 20 games or so, diba? The elimination games are streamed on the TV, but hindi pwedeng women's din, diba? So I think those are the questions that we need to keep asking. Bakit hindi din? Diba? Why not? Right? And that goes the same for coverage in terms of international games. So one of the aspects of the Southeast Asian Games, which I really appreciated, was that all our games were streamed on live television. And when we look at coverage for the women's national football team, that was the only time it was streamed in mainstream television. But when we look at the men's team, diba, their regular tournament games, it's streamed on national TV. Why can't it be the same for women's sports? So I know there are technicalities in terms of rights, etc. But if they're able to do it with another team, I think with the prioritization, or if we wanted to, it could happen. So so definitely that media presence. At the same time, how far it can go pa is the number of girls playing. So I think when you talk about football, women's football here, we still don't have a professional football league, right? And as much as we want there to be one, I think we don't have enough girls playing for that to even happen. When we look at professional women's teams now, I could maybe cite at least 3 that are sort of, that there's an organization to it, there's training, there's quality players playing. But the other teams that would compose of these women's sports they're all university teams, di ba? Like, that wouldn't and shouldn't count when we talk about a pro league. So, in that aspect, malayo pa ang kailangan i-improve ng women's games. So, the next question naturally would be like, how can we get more girls playing? And I think what can be done is to make it, diba, as streamlined as possible. Maybe include, maybe, I don't know lang you could cite more, or those watching can come up with more solutions. But why not connect with DepEd to streamline all schools, public, private, to have at least a women's football team? That's one, diba? Because we talk about opportunity to play. Not everyone may know about football, but if it's there, if it's part of their environment, diba, there's an opportunity for girls to try it out. And then with a proper, of course, like, system to it, you can get more quality girls playing. And at the end of the day, it would benefit back to the country. Because if you have more girls playing, you get more, the competition gets higher, and at the same time there's more quality players that the national team can pick and select and grow the sport all the more. So ayun, when you talk about that, it seems so big. So I hope we do continue and we keep the conversation going. That's why I appreciate you asking that. Thank you, Vigo.
Yeah, and I think also it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation. Parang if you want more girls to play, then you have to show more games. You're not gonna get more girls to play unless they actually see more games. But okay.
Yeah. Sorry, to add to that,
Yeah.
Lanjigan, which I think it's possible. It's possible. And I say this because um, a good example here would be the Women's World Cup last 2019 or 2018. Diba? Prior to, dun talaga, nung nag-World Cup, the most recent World Cup, we saw really a boom women's, or women's proof of concept na it can be marketable, it can generate profit. So it's more of a choice from the major stakeholders as well to say like, hey, we're gonna invest in this sport. Diba? Kahit ano lang siya, maybe I think that's one of the maybe barriers that, or potential barriers to entry for major stakeholders, is that they maybe aren't convinced that it's going to sell, diba? But so to, parang a solution there would be, why not to just try, diba? Do like a 6 month thing or a 1 month thing. Sorry, not 1 month. That's not enough. So a 1 year thing. You execute maybe, or you play number of games on the TV, and then after this, you identify certain parang KPIs, diba? Key performance indicators na to properly say na, hey, it can generate. Kasi I think that's just what we need to do. We need to try, di ba? Hindi pa naman alam, tapos parang kina-cross out na siya, which shouldn't be. Ayun.
Yeah,
I could go on and on and on. So that could be another episode, but yeah, it's the conversation. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and yeah, I think like for example, it's definitely not about performance, because I mean, of course, like I'm a big fan of the Azkals, but they're ranked 125, I think, in FIFA World Rankings, while you guys are ranked 68, or I think you've gone as high as 65. So if we're talking like, they can't you possibly use that excuse to say na okay, they get more attention, but then we're ranked higher. So how is that fair? Like, and the thing is, you guys aren't asking naman na kayo lang yung mapakita, diba? We're like, it's just like, why not us?
Yeah, why not both? Actually, that's a question. Why not both, diba? When we look at sports stores in the Philippines, where the men's national athlete jerseys are being sold, diba? Why not also the women's team, right? And it's funny because when you talk about the nitty-gritty of it, and of course there's sensitivities to it, but when you talk about jerseys, when you compare the Philippines with the other countries, diba, wherein the men's and the women's teams, even jersey kits or sponsorships are from the same sponsor, it's the same. So I think that's the challenge that we can sort of push a little bit farther. Equality in that sense, diba? Why not a negotiating point would be, oh, we could get the sponsorship if it's like a package deal. You do both men's and women's. And I think that's possible. It's really just matter of maybe pushing towards that direction or even believing that that is fair. Because diba? When you our actions are driven by our beliefs. So when we believe that it is equal for men's, or if we believe that men's and women's football athletes should have equal things or should be treated the same, then we'd start making actions that follow that belief. So for those who for the people watching, diba? Just keep challenging that and know that it starts with the belief of no equality.
Yeah, and I mean for me, like I bought the last as cultures, and I'm waiting na lang for the women's teams to release it, but I can get my hands on a CamRod jersey na rin. No, okay.
Thanks, Vigo. Dami nga nagtatanong actually na fans. So I'd have like supporters of the team ask where to get the jerseys, and that's how I asked, like, saan nga ba? Diba? Why not? Why isn't it easily accessible to the community? Because part of growing the sport also is growing the community, diba? And I think it's a good sign towards the growth of the women's sports that there are people who are willing to spend, diba, to have merchandise of a women's team. So these small factors, no matter how small, actually do point towards the direction where we want to go, which is really to grow, diba? To make it as streamlined as possible, to make the opportunities as available as possible. Abangan, gagawa kami.
Stay tuned. Okay. So like I was mentioning earlier, you guys are ranked 68th. I think right now 68th in the world. So now I want to talk about your experience with the national team, with the international games, and like I mentioned also earlier, you were actually part of the national team. Parang, what was that? Right out of high school?
I started playing for the youth national team at around 14. So second year high school, under the under 16 and under 19 division. But when I turned 15, 16, I started training already with the senior team. Yeah.
So is it really common, like even until now, do you guys have players that are really that young, like straight out of high school?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we do. So I think that's one of the advantages for, especially for young players who are exposed to such high level competition at such a young age. No, but the challenge still continues with figuring out how to transition and seamlessly integrate the young players and the youth national team into the senior national team, because I think there's a gap in between that. Uh, when you talk about youth national team right now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, parang siyang under 16 ang youngest. Recently lang nagka under 20 girls. Tapos biglang senior national team na. No? So I think this is more on the admin sense. How do you solve, or how do you properly seamlessly integrate the players together, diba? From youth up until maybe college, up until they're in the senior team. Because I think it's possible with the proper plan and proper goal setting. But now it's more of just like, hey, you're invited to train if you would want to train with us. If you would want to stay with the youth national team, that's okay too. Yeah.
Okay. So when you first joined right after high school, were you automatic? Not even automatic, but like were you already part of the lineup from the get go?
Yeah. So fortunately enough, no, I was playing from the start. Um, so one of the things that I was thankful or that I'm thankful for is that even if I was training under 16, under 19, I was already exposed to training with the senior team. Um, and how the dynamics of getting into to the team goes is you train with them, and then at the end of siguro a certain tryout period, may lineup na. So you either get cut or you make it into the team. So I think I do remember first two times I trained for the senior national team, I got cut. But that's fine. Like at the end of the day, like the day after I got cut, I was still training with the team because my mentality there was, I need maybe the reason why I got cut is because I need more experience, more training. So why not keep training with the team? So thankfully, the third time that I tried out with the senior team, I was able to make it to the lineup. And when you make it into the lineup, sama ka na dun sa, sa trip. Ayun. So I think my first international tournament with the national team was in Laos, if I'm not mistaken, around 15 or 16. And yeah, I was able to score a goal in my first tournament with the senior team. One of my career highlights. Ayan. I was one of the youngest in the team. I was able to score versus Malaysia. And then, ayun, I knew na, I guess my persistence sort of paid off na even if I was just getting cut at the start, diba? I sort of earned my way there and got to contribute to the team in that sense.
Okay, so we were talking earlier about, the transition from grade school to high school to college. Technically, kasi yung transition mo now is like high school to international also. But I have to ask about how the level of competition is in the international game. Like, because aside from, I think one of the biggest factors there is here in the Philippines, like when you go to high school, to college, for example, you're playing against people that you've seen before or that you've played against before. These people talagang you've never played a game against them. So it's really, I'm sure I don't know how hard it is, but like, that's why I want to ask na parang, what was that transition or what was that adjustment like?
Right. Actually, my first international experience was when I was in grade 7. No, that was even before the national team. So my dad made the decision to make me represent through Rifa naman. So we went to like Denmark Cup, Norway Cup. So it's not national team duties, but it's more of representing the country in an international tournament in that sense. And at how old was I? 12? At 11 or 12 to be exposed that early to the international stage. My first impression was really like, wow, these girls are big. Yun talaga, like, we were playing under 14, basically with the people our age. And when we'd look at them, or when I would look at them, I'd be like, sure ka, same age kami. Like, ba't ang laki nila? So when we talk about that kind of exposure, they are bigger, and naturally, when they're bigger, they're a bit faster and stronger than you. So, but the thing about us Filipinos, naman, that I saw was our advantage is that we are pretty quick. So, we won some games there, we lost some games, but really, at the end of the day, it was more like exposure to the international game na parang, hey, ganito pala sa ibang country, diba? They're more of the long shot kind of play, or they're more of the quick passing kind of teams. So I guess I didn't understand it as much then, but looking back, I appreciated na at 11, 12, I was able to see how it was like there. But Jigo, it's different when it's a national team, because in the national team, especially like with the Philippines and how our games are set up now, we're basically playing the same teams more or less, because the teams that we play against, they have definitive styles of play. So part of your preparation as a team would be to study also how the opponents play and how specific key players in that team play. So in that sense, you also parang part of your tactical training would be to practice as a team against that kind of opponent. Ganon.
Okay. And I guess then the difference of like now is there's a lot more scouting. I'm sure as compared to grade school, I don't think you'd be scouting your opponents that much. Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your most parang memorable international experience? Or syempre kasama yung SEA Games din. I mean, even if it was here, you can count that. But
Given
like
na
which
yun.
one?
Sure na yun.
But yeah, which one? What would you say is your most memorable international experience?
um, it would have to be the 2018 Olympic qualifiers in Tajikistan. So it was memorable in a sense na the place itself, diba? You're in Tajikistan, you're in the place where it's the first time you visited it, and it was cold. We were playing in 0 to single-digit weather, right? So pretty exciting when you think about it. But the downside there was you had to warm up more because it was
Yeah.
physically cold. But in that tournament kasi, that was the last tournament of 2018, and my journey in 2018 as a football athlete was quite a rocky one. So it wasn't my best performing year, right? And 20 that tournament in Tajikistan around November was the tournament where I sort of bounced back and sort of found my footing again. And I remember one specific game, which is the Philippines versus Mongolia game, wherein it was the first time the whole year Philippines were playing as a team. And it was in that game where, syempre, sabi ko, hala, first 11 na ako, so kailangan galingan ko. I need to like show that, diba, that I earned my spot here, right? Because first, that was probably like the third or fourth game of that tournament na eh. So, in the earlier games of that tournament, I was just coming in as a sub. So, for me to earn a spot in the lineup then, starting lineup, I knew I was doing something right. So I came into the game knowing that. And what stuck to me there was when on the bus ride going to the stadium, I was just talking to my mom. I was like, Ma, it's been a long year. Like, can you please help me? Diba? You know what all the moments that led up to this. Please be, the wind behind my wings and just help me perform. And I remember praying to her and falling asleep. So, and then when I woke up, wala, I was calm na. I was sort of composed. And thankfully, I played well in that game and I even scored a goal. Diba? And then it was only after the game that I realized, hala, it was the same week pala of my mom's death anniversary. So I was like, it was you, mom. Yeah,
Okay.
so kaya siya memorable to me. Eh. So Jigs, very spiritual, meaningful person talaga. Athlete, ayan. Kaya siya
Okay.
memorable. And
So
at the end of the
sorry.
tournament, we ended up qualifying into the round 2. So it was all the more meaningful.
Okay. So I just have to ask. Here in the Philippines, obviously you're gonna go with all. I mean, you're. It's either really really hot or it's raining, especially when you're talking about football. So parang, how do you even prepare for snow? Because I'm sure nobody here has that. I mean, you know what I mean. It's not something that you're gonna be able to physically experience here in the country.
Right, right. Um, it's interesting because we knew that it was going to be cold. So of course, knowing the weather during those dates is very important. Like, is it gonna snow? Like, how cold will it be? Will it be rainy? Diba? So, siguro fortunate enough naman that team who went to the 2018 Tajikistan tournament already has experience of the Tajikistan weather because they played there, I think, 2017. Eh. So they knew na it was going to be cold. So I guess we came into that place a little bit more prepared we knew we had to have warmers. We knew na, okay, we'd have to do the warm-up inside versus the warm-up outside. So how we set up our preparation physically there was um, before games, all the dynamic stretches, the activation. Usually we do it outside on the pitch, but we wanted to sort of regulate or increase our body temperature already. So dun kami sa loob mag-warm up. Tapos sa labas na lang kami mag-ano. So pag warm na kami, tsaka na lang magpa-passing, ganon. And then meron kaming pack sa bench ng mga one petroleum jelly. We'd also have like those things na when you rub or when you break, it would warm your hands. So may mga ganong kind of preparation. So it was an experience, super interesting. Yeah.
And the playing though, because I mean, I don't play that much football, but like ang alam ko is syempre mas masaya or mas masarap maglaro in rain. So
Yeah.
obviously you don't want to. So but when we go to snow or that cold, is it something that's
Yeah.
actually, I don't know, refreshing?
Masarap na siyang maglaro pag mainit na yung katawan mo at warm ka na talaga. Because yung init galing na sa loob eh. So that cold air on your wind and into your body, dun mo na siya may enjoy. Pero the first time you step out of the bus and feel how cold it is, wala. Dead ka na. Yeah.
Okay. So now I want to ask or get your thoughts on how not just football teams, not just the football team, but a lot of the different sports here in the country have very, very young national team members. And especially if you compare it to the other countries, like let's say the US women's national team, a lot of them are professional. All of them are professionals, and they've been doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, like they're siguro 30s or like approaching the 30s, mga ganun, diba? As opposed to here where you started after high school, or a lot of our players in all the different sports are at least fresh from college.
Right.
And I want to know parang your thoughts on like, is that something that you think works or is good for us, or is it something is just a result of not having a lot of pro leagues in all of these different sports?
Yeah, so definitely, I think the younger that you start with a proper program, the better. But if you do not have a proper program in place, then you sort of look at other options, which is what we're doing now. We focus more on university team players. So at the end of the day, it goes back to, again, number of girls playing and what kind of quality girls are you producing with that certain pool. So ayun, the next challenge for us is to continue fostering the young talent, because they really are the next generation. So if any youth national players watching this, you're next. Kayo na bahala. And no, but really, that's how I view it. You know, the current generation, my generation now, is pushing it to a certain level. But the challenge is, how does the next generation go even beyond? Yeah.
Okay. So now I just have this quick segment, and then we'll end with a few more questions. But I have this segment with all my guests. It's called Change Court, Change Sport. So there's two quick questions.
Okay.
The first one is, actually we'll divide. So whether it's now, in the past, or in the future, maybe when you retire, is there any sport that you've been really interested in or like you've seen around that you've always wanted to try?
If football wasn't an option.
Yeah, or like even now, for example, parang even while you're playing football, like let's say when you retire, you're gonna like, what's a sport that you've always parang, oh, I want to try that?
Biking.
Biking? Why biking?
Yeah. Is that, or did you want competitive sport?
Hindi naman. Any. It's up to you. But like, why biking? Like, what is it about biking?
I guess back to the community, diba? You don't bike on your own, and we have known, diba, there's a boom in the biking community throughout the
Super.
quarantine.
Yeah.
So parang that struck me as interesting. Like, wow, to have this community, parang it makes you want to be part of them also. So, and part of it is I like to travel, diba? Most of the biking routes are very scenic, very appreciative the of our natural resources, and going or touching the ES side of me, diba? What you can see, you're called to protect. So I guess biking exposes you to that, and yeah, you get also the exercise from it.
Yeah, and especially now nga sa pandemic, super nag-boom yung biking, and you can see like people that you didn't know were biking na ngayon like umabot ng tags, yung mga ganun.
Yeah, I know. Nakakaingit ka na parang they post like their Strava ba yan? There's Strava maps, and ang haba ng inikot nila, and it makes you think like, wow, it's possible
Yeah.
to get exercise and to travel in that way. So, galing, galing.
Okay, the
But
second
football pa
question.
yan, Zico.
Of course.
Until I
But
die,
I
football.
found
I'm
it
gonna
I
keep
found it
playing football.
surprising how hard it was for you to imagine na parang wait, so not football?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You'd imagine, Jigo, like, nagko-grow na rin kasi yung parang tournaments for the older generation here in the Philippines. Like, my dad plays for 50 and above. So,
Yeah.
sana may women's team din na ganon. Or, even in Japan, when we'd go to a sports facility, you'd see like 60-year-old men playing football. So, when we saw, like when me and my teammates saw them, parang sabi namin, hanggang pagtanda, ganyan tayo Like, maglalaro pa rin tayo. So, that's why it was hard for me to like imagine myself in a different sport. Yeah.
Okay. The second one is
How about
here.
you? Wait, babalik ko sa'yo. How about you? What sport would you wanna
You're the one.
play?
You're the one being interviewed. I'm interviewing.
Oh, man. I
And
have
I've
to put
tried.
my own podcast so I could interview you.
Yeah, sige. And I told you I'm gonna try all the different sports, diba? So
Okay.
walang limit yan.
Noted.
Okay, so the next one is here in the Philippines. Who would you say is your favorite athlete, but from a different sport? So not football. Not football again, Baka...
Yeah. I guess two players which come to mind. So the first would be Hideline Diaz, because she really is the face of women's sports right now, diba? Na she's the one really pushing the limits of how parang what a woman or what a female athlete deserves in terms of financial support, media support, etc. The next one would be Jack Aninam. So I learned more about her by listening to Girls Got Game.
Yeah.
And I also follow her, or we follow each other on Instagram. And I knew about her because of the Girls Got Game. Sorry, Go Hard Girls.
Go Hard Girls, yeah.
Go Hard Girls. And to listen to her story. And Siege, who is the founder of Go Hard Girls, is successful in her main goal of introducing more female athletes by telling their story. And because I heard Jack's story, and now she's repping the Philippines and Taiwan, diba? Like, that's very admirable, and it takes not just passion but really hard work to get to where she is. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, for me, like even though one of the reasons that I started this whole thing is parang, get to know a lot of the different sports, especially the ones that don't get much attention. But like, for example, there's a lot of athletes like Heidelin Diaz nga, na parang hindi nga masyadong kilala yung weightlifting, but like she kind of like broke that barrier on her own. That's pretty solid. Okay. So just a few more, just last, I think like two more questions. I asked this to Harvey, and I guess I'm gonna ask it to all the football guests that I have. Do you have an issue? Oh no, let's start it with football or soccer.
Whatever gets the support is what we want. Football.
Do you okay? Because when I asked Harvey, he really parang may violent reaction siya. Do you have an issue when people call it soccer?
No, it's fine. Football, soccer, just support us.
Okay. So I guess the last question, what's next for CamRod? What's next for you? What do you have planned with football for the next couple of years?
Yeah. Just to get a medal for the country. Really, that's it. This year we're looking at 3 tournaments. We are waiting to find out if they will push through, but we're currently working for it, despite the restrictions. And then next year we're looking at another 2, 3 more tournaments, and I really will not. I will not retire without winning a medal. So if it happens, ideally it happens in the next 3 years. Is what it what it is. And then in the far future, I'd still be in the women's games. Like, yun pa yan. Till the end, it's gonna be, I'm going to either play for the country or support the team or maybe contribute to the team in whatever manner. But it will always be football.
Well, that makes it hard now. So now, if you win a medal, now people don't want you to win a medal because they don't want you to retire.
No, you'd want more medals. Linis natin. Hopefully, we get into the World Cup showing, but let's see, diba? Medal
sure,
is what we would want.
Definitely.
Silver. Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have. Once again, that was Miss Cam Rodriguez. CamRod, thank you again for guesting today.
Thank you, Jigo. Super had fun.
Thanks, everyone. Let us know what you thought about this episode, and also let us know who else you'd like to hear from, or what other sports you'd like to be discussed here on the podcast, here on the channel. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that like button, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks.